This is the start of a series on my channel that's going to be dedicated to looking into the Flint, Michigan water crisis. I think it's a topic that isn't well understood among a lot of people, but I think it's a very important one that people in the US should learn from and actually understand from a perspective that people often don't. So for this first video, I'll be discussing the lead up to what caused this crisis in America. So I hope you guys enjoy. To start off with, I am an environmental engineering major at a university here in the state of Iowa. Take that as you will. And I have quite a bit of experience learning about the Flint, Michigan crisis because it's an interesting perspective to look at from environmental engineering because it's fundamentally related to it and is one of the most modern examples of an environmental engineering disaster that we have to look at. So it's very important in modern curriculums to begin looking at this new crisis that has emerged. So I have a little bit of information to add to the whole story. But to start off with, I would like to look at water treatment itself because that'll help you get the background you need to understand for the rest of the video. So the process of water treatment is important pretty much for life as we currently know it. So provided is an example of a surface water treatment plant, which is what was used in Flint, Michigan. There's two types of water treatment plants. There is groundwater, which is one of the most common ones, and surface water, which is also common. Groundwater takes it from the ground specifically, where it leaches through the soil and is partially cleaned, while surface water takes it from just the top of a river, like so on and so forth. And it has a different list of issues that must be addressed due to that. So at the start of treatment, we have preliminary treatment, which removes large particles, such as tree branches, or via grit removal, we have sand that is removed so it doesn't clog up machinery. We then have flocculation and coagulation, which help remove smaller particles that are stuck, suspended. So suspended particles, they're forced out via chemicals, which allow them to then, in the sedimentation basin, settle and turn into sediment pretty much. We then send this through filtration, where it's treated with chemicals and stuff such as fluorine, chlorine, chloramines. All this stuff is added to treat it, so once it is sent out into the water, it's going to be cleaned upon exiting the plant, but also while it is in the distribution system. One of the most important chemicals for our example here is anti-corrosive chemicals, which prevent a leaching of lead from metal pipes, or well, copper as well for copper pipes, but for this example, we'll be looking at lead pipes specifically. This will be discussed more in some future episodes I have planned for the series, but it is very important to understand that the issue with lead comes from the existence of current distribution lines which have lead pipes in them. It is not due to lead being sent out at the water treatment plant. It is clean upon exiting, but issues occur when it is in the distribution system. Mainly, for most instances, it is going to be an issue when it goes into premise plumbing, which is the plumbing that goes from the main line under the road, and it connects to it and takes it from the road to your house. And most of the time, if it is an older house, those would be lead pipes, and the city is not usually responsible for replacing them because it costs thousands upon thousands of dollars to replace. Now, that's a topic for another video, but again, just want to make sure the background is understood for you guys. So now I will be looking specifically at the Flint, Michigan issue, or well, the stuff that led up to this issue arising. So leading up to the crisis, there was a ton of issues that occurred, mainly arising from a larger issue of the destruction of the Rust Belt. So those cities that were responsible for creating a bunch of influx of money in the US, when we've slowly been moving away from that, it has just left cities in ruins. And Flint, Michigan is one of those cities. Due to all of this, they had to import water from Detroit in the form of treated water via pipeline. This was going on for 5 decades at the time in which they decided to switch away. They were spending a ton of money and they just couldn't afford it, so they hired the state of Michigan hired a non-expert in water policy and water treatment to look into this and figure out how to save money. And this individual, again a non-expert in the field, decided that the city could save money by pumping water from the Flint River instead of a pipeline that was currently taking it from Detroit. It would save money, and they could just treat it at a current treatment facility they had. And they wanted to do this for a certain amount of time until they had a pipeline to Lake Huron created, but they just needed something to go on for now. A 2 to 3 year process must be taken usually by a special environmental engineering firm to understand the principles of the water. There's a lot to dissect when determining what needs to be done at a water treatment plant. It is a very complex science. There's a lot of different calculations that must be done, and it is in itself its own field within environmental engineering. Usually, they'll have a certain group at these firms that look into this. And it appears from researching everything that occurred, some firms were involved and tested it, but the thorough 2 to 3 year process did not occur due to what they considered an urgent need to save money for the state, and so they instead circumvented the main process, which has resulted in this issue obviously rising. To build up your background a little bit more, I'm going to be quoting an article that's provided in the description of this video. Quote, "The Flint River is naturally high in corrosive chloride. Therefore, iron pipes in the water distribution system began corroding immediately after the initial switch from Detroit water. The iron that was released from the corroding pipes reacted with the residual chlorine that is added to kill microorganisms, making it unavailable to function as a disinfectant." End quote. This led to a number of errors that occurred, and I think really resulted in our country learning the complexities of water treatment. We're starting to learn. We still have not learned, obviously, due to this issue still going on. And it showed a disconnect for the environmental engineers involved. And it's very disturbing, the fact that they did not notice this. This is a very simple thing to test for. You honestly don't even really need to have a background in environmental engineering to test the water. Most of the time, the people that test the water are actually not environmental engineers. It's a very simple thing. Take a sample and test in a lab. I mean, hell, you could test the water yourself. I mean, if you get a testing kit to test water treatment, I mean, they do it for pools all the time. It's not a difficult thing. And if they had done it, they would have realized that there's a lot of chloride in the water and they would have needed extra treatment. That costs a lot, which may have resulted in the reasoning behind taking water from Detroit is that they realized that they could not make a profit by treating their own water. I mean, there's plenty of things that should have been taken into account due to the high corrosive nature of the water, but they just weren't. It never was. And even without that, a switch, say, of location for a pump at any river, just in a broad scheme of water treatment, if you move a pump just a little ways and you don't test for pH changes, that alone could corrode your entire system. Just a slight change in pH out of the optimal range that you have accounted for in your calculations could change it. It's very easy in nature for things to go just barely out of that necessary range, and it can cause a lot of issues. Given that our pipes are full of biofilms, a bunch of bacteria and viruses and all of that, and given the fact that we constantly need to monitor pressure in the system, it's just asking for issues to arise if you don't take into account this change in water source. And realistically, if they were operating in good faith, they would have immediately tested the water upon swapping without even sending it out into the full system, because you're just asking for bad things to go down. They should have tested individual pipes in certain houses around the city, done a complex investigation to see how this change would affect the pipes in the city, and it did not occur. This was a failure on the city's part, it was a failure on the state's part, and it was a failure on all of the engineers involved. And still to this day, they have not solved this issue. And it's just disgusting, the lack of respect everyone involved in this situation had for the city, and for its citizens especially. Like I said, this video is simply a a background behind water treatment, a background behind the switch that occurred and has resulted in the crisis. The next video will be looking more at the crisis specifically and some more intricacies of it. And then at least one, maybe two videos after that I have planned and I need to start working on will be about how this impacts everyone in the US and specifically how we can treat it in the future.